Grindelwald template, but Hogwarts White Demon King. Chapter 1. 1991, England. Jax opened his eyes. Above him was the familiar ceiling. But there was a strong sense of detachment. However, today was exceptionally different. He sat up, the cold bed frame creaking, then he murmured to himself. 11 years. It had been exactly 11 years since he came to this inexplicable world. Fragments of memories still flickered in his mind. It was an explosion, flashing with fire, followed by intense pain. Then, boundless darkness. When he opened his eyes again, he was surrounded by unfamiliar faces and an unfamiliar language. Soon after, the orphanage became his home for the past 11 years. This was England, indeed. But something seemed different. He had never found a clear answer. Today was his birthday. His 11th birthday, in the depths of his consciousness. A cold interface appeared without warning. Several blurry lines of text flickered continuously. Current template. Integrated 37%. Magic power. Spellcasting ability. Transfiguration. Alchemy. Potion making level. Ancient magic. Dark magic. SSS. Spells mastered. None. Template core passive. Under the Dark Lord's protection, damage from righteous magic is reduced by 50%. A string of question marks. Jax frowned deeply. What did this mean? His gaze swept downwards. Finally, that slightly clearer piece of data. Dark magic. SSS. Crimson, dazzling, a stark contrast to the other gray question marks. This didn't look like the panel of a righteous character, did it? Immediately after, beneath the crimson number, another smaller line of text appeared, almost like a note. Evaluation. One of the strongest beginner protection templates. Don't worry, orientation protection has been corrected. Jax. The muscles in his face twitched slightly. First, a screen full of question marks, then an alarmingly high dark magic talent, and finally, an orientation protection prompt. Had this system broken during the transmigration process? What was all this about? Jax. Happy birthday. In the common room, sincere blessings rang out. Several children from the orphanage gathered around him, their faces adorned with innocent smiles. Standing at the very front was Mrs. Alice. She was the director of this orphanage. She had soft, wavy flaxen hair and a pair of beautiful blue eyes. At this moment, she was holding a small cake with 11 candles, carefully walking towards Jax. The faint candlelight flickered gently. Make a wish quickly, Jax. She urged softly, with anticipation. Jax looked at the warm flame, at Alice, and at the children around him. He closed his eyes. A wish. As an orphan, he wasn't sure what kind of wish would be appropriate. He blew out the candles. The children let out a small cheer. Jax, this is for you. Alice took out a small gift, carefully wrapped in old newspaper, from behind her back. It was a hand-knitted scarf. I knitted it myself. Jax picked up the scarf, the wool felt a bit scratchy. Thank you, I like it very much. He said softly. Even though it's summer now, you can still wear it if you get cold. Alice looked up at him. Also, you've been distracted lately. Is something on your mind? Jax shook his head. Nothing, just thinking about some things. About the system. About that template. About that inexplicable prompt. But, these were things he couldn't tell anyone. If something's wrong, you must tell me. Alice said earnestly, we are friends. Jax nodded. The party ended. The children dispersed. Jax took the cake and the scarf, returning to his small room. The room was tiny. It could only accommodate a bed and an old wardrobe. Outside the window, London's usual gloomy sky was slowly swallowing the last rays of light. He placed the cake on the windowsill and carefully stored the scarf in the bottom of the wardrobe. Sitting on the edge of the bed, he once again immersed his consciousness into the mysterious system interface. It was still gray, filled with question marks. Just then. Tap, tap, tap. Clear knocking sounds came from the direction of the window. Jax abruptly looked up. Outside the window, an owl was staring at him with its big, round eyes. Its sharp beak tapped leisurely on the glass. A thick envelope was tied to its leg. Jax opened the window in confusion, then let the owl fly in. The owl extended its leg, tied with the letter, towards him. Jax untied the letter. The owl immediately flapped its wings and flew away. This was a letter delivered by an owl. Made of thick, durable parchment. The address was written in a vibrant emerald green ink, with a peculiar slanted English handwriting. To Jack's, Alice Orphanage. His gaze moved upwards, above was a special emblem. A badger, a snake, a lion, an eagle. A capital, H. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. It was as if 5 bolts of lightning struck deep within his mind. All the fog shattered at this moment. Hogwarts. Harry Potter. So that's it. So it was the world of Harry Potter. No wonder there was magic. However, the current timeline, he stood in the center of the room, unmoving for a long time. After the immense shock, there was a strange realization. Dark magic. SSS. Evaluation. One of the strongest beginner protection templates. Don't worry, orientation protection has been corrected. All clues pointed to one name. Isn't this the template of the first Dark Lord, Gellert Grindelwald? After all. Besides this man, who else would be so lovingly involved with the White Lord? However, Jack's lips slowly curved into an arc. His template was Grindelwald. All doubts vanished into thin air, replaced by a sense of excitement. The world of Harry Potter. Grindelwald's template. He murmured these 2 phrases. He looked at the acceptance letter. He was already looking forward to it. Jack sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the parchment envelope. None of this was an illusion. It was the world of Harry Potter. He took a deep breath. The plot he once knew was now blurred, but his mind rapidly recalled some fragments. The boy who lived, and the one whose name could not be spoken. Compared to Grindelwald, he was a more insane, more fanatical Dark Lord. Now, he possessed Grindelwald's template. This meant infinite potential. But it also meant danger. Great danger. Because Dumbledore, the headmaster of Hogwarts, the greatest white wizard of this century. He was the one who defeated Grindelwald back then. If this wise old man were to detect even a trace of Grindelwald's aura. Jax could almost imagine the sharp, eagle-like gaze behind those half-moon spectacles. It's over. This can't be. He looked down at his empty hands. Aside from this system panel, which was almost entirely question marks, with only dark magic, glaringly bright. He needed power, he needed knowledge. And then he needed to unlock this fooled template. It seems I must go to Hogwarts. Only by entering that castle and systematically learning magic. Could he truly understand and control the secrets within him. Only then could he have a place to stand in the coming storm. Finally. He tore open the envelope. The letter inside was also parchment. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry Headmaster. Albus Dumbledore, President of the International Confederation of Wizards, Grand Sorcerer, First Class of the Order of Merlin, Chief Warlock of the Wizengamot. Dear Mr. Jax, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Indeed. Such a standard format for an admission letter. And attached was a list of required textbooks and equipment. He was even more certain of his current timeline. He carefully folded the letter. And put it back into the envelope. The next day. The sky was still gray. Breakfast was bland oatmeal and dry toast. After Jax quietly finished eating, he was about to leave the dining hall. Jax. A gentle voice called out to him. Mrs. Alice, a woman nearing 50, with some gray at her temples, but eyes always full of kindness. She held a thin folder in her hand, a somewhat serious smile on her face. There are some things I need to discuss with you. Jax nodded. The headmistress's office. Small, but neat and clean. The air was filled with a faint scent of old books mixed with disinfectant. Mrs. Alice gestured for Jax to sit on the old chair opposite her. Jax, first of all, happy birthday again. She said with a smile, time flies. In the blink of an eye, you're already 11. Jax listened quietly. As is customary, at your age, you need to start thinking about secondary school. Mrs. Alice opened the folder, which contained several printed forms and some handwritten notes. We know you're a smart and sensible child. The orphanage has discussed it and contacted several potential sponsors. We've decided that we will do our best to support you through your secondary education until you can stand on your own. Jax was slightly taken aback. Thank you, Mrs. Alice. He said softly. His voice held genuine gratitude. A warm current, unexpectedly, surged through his heart. He knew the orphanage's situation well. Funds were always tight. It was already difficult for the children to be fed and clothed. Sponsoring a child through secondary school, even the most ordinary public school, was a considerable expense for the orphanage. But Mrs. Alice still brought up this idea. Mrs. Alice smiled, seemingly relieved. It's good that you understand. We've looked at a few schools, and although they're a bit far and require boarding, the teaching quality is quite good. She began to describe the middle schools. Their ethos, curriculum, approximate costs. Jax listened quietly. In his mind, he began to consider how to refuse. Because he had to go to Hogwarts. But what about Hogwarts tuition? The letter didn't mention a specific amount. But he could imagine that a magic school would require textbooks, robes, wands, and other strange equipment, all of which would surely cost a lot of galleons. How could this poor orphanage afford Hogwarts tuition? Moreover, he couldn't reveal the existence of the wizarding world. Was he supposed to tell Mrs. Alice directly that he had received a letter delivered by an owl and was going to a magic school called Hogwarts? He could almost imagine the worried and confused expression that would appear on her face. Jax, are you listening? Mrs. Alice noticed his distraction and asked with concern. You seem to have something on your mind. Are you not satisfied with these schools? Jax looked up, meeting her sincere and concerned eyes. He couldn't tell her the truth. But he couldn't give up easily either. No, Mrs. Alice, the schools are all good. I just need a little time to think. Because this is a very important decision for me. Mrs. Alice nodded understandingly. Of course. That's perfectly understandable. You don't have to rush into a decision, there's still some time before the new term starts. Her tone was gentle. Remember, Jax, no matter what decision you make, the orphanage will support you. I understand. Jax stood up and bowed deeply to the lady who had always given him warmth. Thank you very much, and thank you for everything the orphanage has done for me. Leaving the headmistress's office, Jax's mood did not lighten. He returned to his small room. Outside the window, the sky remained overcast. But his gaze gradually sharpened. His eyes fell once again on the admission letter lying quietly on the windowsill. Apply for aid to Hogwarts. Secure a scholarship by guaranteeing academic performance. Dumbledore would surely agree, wouldn't he? Suddenly, he understood, he needed to talk to the professor. A month passed quietly. London's summer saw alternating rain and sunshine. Jax sat by the window. His consciousness had sunk into the system interface countless times. But nothing had changed. It was still just rows and rows of stubborn question marks. He had tried every method imaginable. Yet, the system remained completely unresponsive. The Grindelwald template, aside from a name and that ridiculously high dark arts talent, it hadn't brought anything substantial. Not even a single bout of accidental magic. Jax frowned deeply. There was truly nothing else he could do. Jax. Mrs. Alice's voice rang out, stopping him once again in the hallway after dinner. Regarding secondary school, what have you decided? She asked gently, we need to have an answer soon. Jax stopped, sighing inwardly. He knew he couldn't stall any longer. He had maintained silence throughout this period. If he continued to delay, it would make things difficult for Mrs. Alice. Mrs. Alice. He took a deep breath. I might not need the orphanage to contact a secondary school for me. Mrs. Alice froze for a moment. You don't need it. Jax, what do you mean? Jax nodded. I received an acceptance letter from a special school. I've decided to attend there. A special school. Mrs. Alice's brow furrowed slightly. Which school is it? Jax was silent for a moment. Then, he clearly spoke the name. Hogwarts. Hogwarts. The confusion in Mrs. Alice's eyes turned to blankness. I've never heard of that school. Which county is it in? Is it a boarding school? What about its accreditation? Her barrage of questions came to an abrupt halt. Because she saw Jax's expression, which was unusually calm. It was as if this choice was already set in stone. Jax, are you sure? You won't be tricked or hurt, will you? I am sure. Jax's reply held no hesitation. It is very special. He couldn't explain further. Should he tell her it was a school that taught magic, and the letter was delivered by an owl? He could only remain silent. The air seemed to solidify for a moment. Mrs. Alice looked at the child standing before her, the one she had watched grow up. In the end, she just nodded. All right, Jax. If you insist, I will try to accept your decision. Jax nodded. I understand. Thank you for your understanding. He turned and left. His figure, framed by the light and shadow of the corridor, seemed somehow different. It was as if this child was inherently unlike others. Mrs. Alice watched his retreating back, still pondering. Hogwarts. What kind of school was that, exactly? A few days later. One afternoon. The sky cleared, and sunlight spilled across the orphanage courtyard. Jax sat in the shade of an old oak tree. He held an old book in his hand. Just then, his attention was drawn to a figure outside the courtyard fence. It was a well-proportioned, elegantly striped tabby cat. It sat quietly and dignifiedly on the low wall outside the fence. Most notably, its eyes were unusually serious, even carrying a sense of scrutiny. It was staring intently at Jax. Wait a minute. Could this cat be Minerva McGonagall? He closed the book. She's here. Finally. Sure enough, only a few minutes passed. Mrs. Alice hurried out from the main building. Jax. There's a lady here to see you. She said she is a professor. Jax stood up and brushed the grass clippings off his trousers. All right, I understand, Mrs. Alice. He followed Mrs. Alice toward the parlor. Before leaving, sure enough, the tabby cat was gone. Inside the parlor, a lady was already seated there. She wore a strict, dark green robe and had a serious expression. A pair of square spectacles rested on the bridge of her nose. It was Professor Minerva McGonagall. Seeing Jax enter, she nodded slightly. Mr. Jax. Hello, I am Professor Minerva McGonagall. Jax nodded. Hello, I am Jax. Professor McGonagall acknowledged him. Mrs. Alice, thank you for receiving me. May I speak with Mr. Jax alone? Of course, certainly. Mrs. Alice quickly nodded and withdrew from the parlor. Only the two of them remained in the room. Professor McGonagall did not beat around the bush. Mr. Jax, I trust you have already received your acceptance letter to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Yes, Professor. Jax nodded. Then you should already be prepared for what we are about to discuss. Professor McGonagall's gaze settled upon him. Hogwarts is one of the finest schools of magic in Europe, dedicated to nurturing young witches and wizards. Magic talent has manifested in you, which is why the school has extended an invitation. She briefly introduced Hogwarts' 4 houses and the basic curriculum. Jax listened quietly. He nodded at appropriate moments. Then he tried hard to feign astonishment. The kind of shock an ordinary person should display upon first encountering the wizarding world. Mr. Jax, now that you know all this, are you still willing to attend Hogwarts? I am willing, Professor. Jax's answer was without the slightest hesitation. I am very eager to enter Hogwarts and study magic. However, I face a practical problem. What problem? Tuition fees. Jax's voice was steady. Then he emotionlessly described his current circumstances. The orphanage where I live is not financially well off and cannot afford these expenses. Professor McGonagall's eyebrow twitched slightly. Hogwarts has a fund. It is specifically used to assist Muggle-born students who cannot afford the tuition. But it requires excellent academic performance too. Muggle-born. Jax felt a momentary flicker of realization, but he didn't show anything. I understand. I also hope to rely on my own abilities to earn this financial aid. He straightened his back slightly. I promise you, Professor McGonagall. I will strive to achieve the most outstanding results to repay the assistance the school grants me. A hint of relaxation seemed to appear on Professor McGonagall's serious face. This boy was interesting. I understand, Mr. Jax. Professor McGonagall nodded, a touch of appreciation in her tone. I will relay this truthfully to Headmaster Dumbledore. Regarding the financial aid, the school will assess and make arrangements. Thank you very much, Professor McGonagall. Finally. A heavy weight finally lifted halfway from his heart. Professor McGonagall had a brief conversation with Mrs. Alice. In the end, Mrs. Alice accepted the situation. Jax would be attending secondary school at Hogwarts. After seeing Professor McGonagall off, Mrs. Alice found Jax. Jax. I still don't quite understand all this. But that lady seemed like a trustworthy professor. If this is truly the path you want. She paused, and her gaze became resolute. The orphanage will still help support you. Jax was startled. Mrs. Alice, Professor McGonagall said the school has a financial aid fund. Yes. Mrs. Alice interrupted him. But this is a gesture from us at the orphanage. You grew up here, you are our child. You'll need some pocket money when you go off to school. The money we give you is a token of our affection. You must take care of yourself. Jax's heart felt heavy. This was more than just financial assistance. It was a depth of feeling difficult to express. Thank you, Mrs. Alice. I won't forget this. He would never forget this kindness, this help in a time of need. Mrs. Alice reached out and gently stroked his hair. Go on, child. Go and become an exceptional person. Early morning. The mist dispersed. Jax stood outside the orphanage. The suitcase at his feet contained all his worldly possessions. A few changes of clothes, and the gray scarf knitted by Madame Alice. He glanced back. It was time to leave. Professor McGonagall stood beside him, still clad in her impeccable, deep green robes. Are you ready, Mr. Jax? Yes, Professor. Professor McGonagall said no more. She drew the wand from her sleeve. She walked to the side of the road and raised her wand elegantly. The next second, a deafening roar sounded without warning. Bang! A triple-decker bus violently squeezed itself out of thin air, instantly appearing right before their eyes. This was the night bus. Jax was mentally prepared. But experiencing it firsthand still startled him. The impact was intense. What is this? The night bus. It provides emergency transport for stranded witches and wizards. Let's get on, Mr. Jax. She walked toward the bus first. Then, a thin, bespectacled young man poked his head out. Welcome to the night bus, I'm Stan Shunpike, your conductor, and you. Oh, Professor McGonagall. Hello. Please come aboard. Professor McGonagall gave a slight nod. 2 seats. To the leaky cauldron. Jax followed Professor McGonagall onto the bus. He looked around the interior, which was even more chaotic and cramped than it looked from the outside. Sure enough, this bus specialized in serving itinerant wizards. Stan eyed Jax curiously. New face. First time on the night bus. How does it feel? We can go inside. Professor McGonagall's voice sounded beside him. Interrupting Stan. It was quite a shock. Then the bus moved. It began weaving through the buildings. After an even more violent jolt, it screeched to a halt. The leaky cauldron. Jax followed Professor McGonagall off the bus. He looked up at their destination. A dirty, cramped pub, sandwiched between a large bookstore and a record shop. The facade was already dilapidated. The leaky cauldron. This is a gathering place for witches and wizards. Powerful muggle-repelling charms prevent muggles from noticing it. She pushed open the creaking wooden door. The light was dim. Inside, it was deafeningly noisy. The air was thick with a mixture of toasted bread, smoke, and peculiar herbal scents. Wizards in various bizarre outfits sat at rough wooden tables, talking and laughing loudly. However, the moment Professor McGonagall entered, the clamor instantly subsided, and the noise level dropped significantly. As expected, that was the authority of Professor McGonagall. They then passed Old Tom's bar counter. And arrived in front of a dirty brick wall at the back of the pub. This is one of the main entrances connecting the Muggle world and Diagon Alley. Diagon Alley is our destination today. Remember the sequence of bricks to tap. As she spoke, her wand tapped the bricks on the wall precisely 3 times. Then, the bricks began to shake violently, contracting inward and outward, forming a wide archway. The street was densely packed with all sorts of peculiar shops on both sides. This was Diagon Alley. Welcome to Diagon Alley, Mr. Jax. Where are we going? Professor McGonagall pointed in the other direction down the street. Now, we first need to go to Gringotts. Gringotts? Jax pretended to ask curiously. He knew about the Goblin Bank. After all, it was the only place for wizarding currency exchange. Inside Gringotts now, many goblins were busy sitting behind the long counters. Muggle currency exchange. The goblin's voice was shrill. Jax took out the allowance Madame Alice had given him, all in loose pounds. The goblin counted it expressionlessly. 10 galleons, 3 sickles. Do you require an explanation of the exchange rate? No. I will explain it to the student. Professor McGonagall stood nearby, her gaze calm. Jax looked at the galleons, then put them all away. He walked out of Gringotts' cold hall. Jax carefully put away the galleons and sickles. Afterward, Professor McGonagall prepared to take him to buy robes, books, and so on. But her gaze suddenly stopped. A figure in the distance. It was a giant. His hair and beard were messy. He was wearing a heavy moleskin coat. Standing beside him was a small, thin boy. Black hair, messy, wearing round framed glasses. His green eyes were filled with wonder and confusion. Rubius. Professor McGonagall's voice held a hint of severity. Hagrid spun around abruptly. Professor McGonagall. Hagrid, I recall Headmaster Dumbledore instructed you to. Professor McGonagall's gaze swept over the boy next to him. Her voice trailed off. Oh, right. We're shopping, Harry needs his school books. Hagrid seemed to only just realize Jax was there. Who's this? Professor McGonagall introduced them. This is Rubius Hagrid, keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts. And this is Jax, a new student this year. And this is. The last question was directed at Harry Potter, her gaze carrying a hint of inquiry. Harry. Jax. Jax. You're a new student too. Yes. Jax released his hand. Professor McGonagall is taking me to buy my school supplies. Me too. Hagrid is helping me. Harry looked at Hagrid, who was grinning broadly. Jax looked Harry up and down. Just as the two continued talking, a voice interrupted them. All right, gentlemen. You will have plenty of time to get acquainted at school. For now, we must complete our respective errands. Hagrid quickly nodded. Right. Harry, we still need to get your wand. Jax nodded, his gaze profound. See you at school, Harry. The savior. Harry Potter. This was the boy who lived. But now was not the time to make friends. Regarding the system. Regarding magic. He still had many things to explore. Now, Mr. Jakes. It's time for us to complete the most important item on your list. Her gaze fell upon a small, dilapidated shop beside the street. The peeling gold sign read, Ollivander. Makers of fine wands since 382 BC. A single wand lay alone in the window. This is. Come in, you'll like it here. The shop was long, narrow, and dim, piled high with boxes. A peculiar scent permeated the air. Professor McGonagall. What a rare pleasure. Mr. Ollivander recognized the visitor. The white-haired old man poked his head out, his eyes settling on the newcomers. Good afternoon, Mr. Ollivander. This is Mr. Jakes, a new student this year. He needs a wand. Following this, Mr. Ollivander's eyes immediately turned to Jakes, his gaze sharp. Ah, a new customer. Well then, let's begin. Which is your wand arm? Right hand. Jakes replied. The next second, the tape measure in his hand automatically flew up and began measuring Jakes. Then he pulled one or two wands from the dense stacks of boxes. Ah, unicorn hair, phoenix tail feathers, and dragon heartstring are all excellent for making wands. Because the wand chooses the wizard. Try this one, hazel, unicorn hair, 9.5 inches. Jakes took the smooth wand. Feeling a chill, he instinctively gave it a wave. Nothing happened. Mr. Ollivander snatched the wand back almost immediately. No. Try this one, mahogany, dragon heartstring, 11 inches, quite powerful. Jakes waved it again. A stack of empty boxes nearby suddenly exploded. Following this, wand after wand was opened. All were unsuitable. Mr. Ollivander muttered to himself. A fussy customer. But with a powerful core. Professor McGonagall stood to the side, her brow slightly furrowed. But she maintained her silence. Suddenly, Mr. Ollivander abruptly looked up. A light burst forth in his eyes, more intense than ever before. Perhaps, only that one remains. An extraordinary wizard requires an extraordinary partner. He turned and walked toward the deepest part of the shop. He retrieved a wand from a long casket made of ancient, dark wood. Its entire body was deep, dark gold. The shaft had subtle dragon scale textures. Under the dim light, it emitted a scorching aura. Instantly, Professor McGonagall and Jakes were both captivated. Legendary wood. Extremely rare. Legend says that ancient dragon lords nested on the legendary wood, forged by dragon breath over 1,000 years. The core is the nerve of a dragon heartstring. 12 inches exactly. Indestructible, with unparalleled power. Since my grandfather crafted it, it has never chosen a wizard. It has always remained dormant. But you may try it. He handed the wand toward Jakes. His expression was complex, holding anticipation mixed with a hint of subtle reverence. All right, sir. Jakes reached out his hand. The moment he touched the dark gold shaft. Boom. An indescribable force swept over his entire body. The dark gold shaft suddenly erupted in blazing golden red light. All the surrounding wand boxes trembled slightly. Fear and dread. Powerful. This wand was immensely powerful. Magnificent. Perfect. As expected, the legend chooses its master. Unparalleled resonance of power. The heart of the Dragon Lord beats only for true power. He cried out, his voice hoarse. Even the usually stern Professor McGonagall showed a flash of unconcealed shock in her eyes. Following this, the light gradually subsided. Jakes gently gripped it. At the same time, deep within his consciousness, the system, which had been silent for a long time, suddenly pulsed. Current template, 40% merged. Walking out of the wand shop, Jakes felt the whole world had changed. Professor McGonagall looked at him, her gaze lingering for a moment on the dark gold wand in his hand. This is a meaningful encounter. I understand, Professor. The only items remaining on your school supply list are the books. Professor McGonagall checked the time. I have some matters I need to attend to within the next half hour. Flourish and Blots is not far ahead. Can you complete this task alone? Jakes nodded. I will, Professor. Thank you. Following this, she turned and left. Her steady steps disappeared into the crowd. Jakes stood alone on the bustling street. His gaze fell upon the largest bookstore not far away. Flourish and Blots. The bookstore was also packed with people. The shelves were filled with various magic books. He then entered. Jakes navigated through the crowded shelves, checking his list. He was looking for basic textbooks like A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration and Magical Theory. Suddenly, a grating boy's voice sounded nearby. Only those who don't know the rules, those with impure blood, squeeze into public bookstores like this. I never expected the poor Weasleys to show up here too. Truly, there's no difference between a blood traitor and a mudblood. Jakes turned his head to look. A pale-faced boy was speaking. His pale blonde hair was slicked back meticulously, conveying an innate sense of superiority. He was staring at a red-haired girl and cursing loudly. Please move aside. The girl's voice was filled with anger. Oh, a Weasley dares to speak my name. The blonde boy sneered. Look at you, red hair, old robes. No wonder you're a blood traitor. Can your family not even scrape together enough money for a new book? Do you have to look for second-hand ones here? The girl stubbornly raised her head. That's none of your business. Of course it's my business. Malfoy smiled smugly. Watching you poor people defile the wizarding world is truly disgusting. Several young wizards watched nearby, but no one dared to speak up. Evidently, none of them dared to provoke him. After all, this was the young master of the Malfoy family. Jakes frowned. He originally didn't want to get involved. But the red-haired girl suddenly ducked and moved closer to Jakes. Malfoy's eyes immediately fell upon the two of them. Malfoy sized up Jakes. When he saw the ordinary orphanage robes Jakes was wearing, unconcealed contempt flashed in his eyes immediately. And who are you? Oh, let me guess, crawled out of some muggle den too. Mudblood? Quote question mark. The scene instantly fell silent. Jakes did not get angry, his tone was icy. Apologize. To both of us. Malfoy was provoked by his attitude. What are you? Do you think you can order me around? Do you know who my father is? I don't care who you are. Jakes cut him off, without any fear in his eyes. I'm asking you, didn't your father teach you manners? You. Malfoy was speechless with rage. Just as he prepared to step closer to intimidate Jakes with his presence, a sudden change occurred. Boom. The dark gold wand in Jakes's hand suddenly emitted a low hum. Then, an invisible wall of air violently expanded outward from the wand. Bang! Malfoy was violently flung away by a massive force. He staggered back a few steps and landed hard on his bottom. What was happening? He didn't understand. But, the second floor of the bookstore immediately fell silent. This was, the wand protecting its master. The wand was protecting this young child. Usually, when a wand's affinity with a wizard reaches its peak and senses that its master is under severe malicious threat, it will automatically trigger this kind of reaction. Even Jakes felt a flicker of surprise. He hadn't expected this newly chosen wand would be so fiercely protective. Do you want to continue? You. Malfoy was both shocked and enraged. He gritted his teeth, glaring fiercely yet nervously at Jakes and the red-haired girl. Then he tried to pull out his own wand. Protecting the master. The word echoed in Jakes's mind. He was truly surprised. Even though he hadn't mastered any spell techniques himself, this wand could actually unleash such power based purely on instinct. The legendary wood and the heart of the Dragon Lord are truly extraordinary. Draco Malfoy's face grew even paler. He fumbled for a long time but couldn't pull out his own wand. His face flushed crimson. This was truly humiliating. Just you wait. I'm not going anywhere either. Jakes was speechless. Ginny, who was behind him, let out a chuckle. On the second floor of the bookstore, you could hear a pin drop. Suddenly, a cold voice rang out, causing the young Malfoy to shudder. Draco. A man appeared at the top of the stairs. His platinum blonde hair was meticulously groomed. His pale, pointed face carried an air of condescending indifference. He held a silver serpent head cane. Lucius Malfoy's gaze fell upon his son's pathetic state. What is going on? Father. He attacked me. With his wand. Oh. His voice grew colder. He even cast a look of utter contempt at Draco Malfoy. Only then did his gaze sharply pierce Jakes. A pathetic mudblood. Attacking a member of the House of Malfoy openly at Flourish and Blots. Do you not understand what rules are? He took a step forward. An invisible pressure spread out. The surrounding wizards subconsciously retreated. Jakes could feel the magical fluctuation emanating from the other party. Powerful. It was completely beyond his ability to fight back, but as Lucius slowly raised his serpent head cane, a slightly anxious yet strong female voice cut in. What is happening here? Lucius Malfoy. What are you doing to these children? A plainly dressed woman with fiery red hair squeezed through the crowd. Mrs. Weasley glanced at Ginny, then noticed Jakes. Her voice was filled with anger. Molly Weasley. Mind your own little brats, and this. Lucius's lips curved into a sarcastic sneer as he glanced scornfully at Jakes. Wild boy who popped up out of nowhere. He attacked my son. Jakes snorted coldly. A dog protecting its pup, understandable. Attack. But all I see is a Malfoy using his power to bully others. The fact is that Draco insulted people first. Molly Weasley emphasized. Insult. I was merely stating a fact. The poverty of the Weasley family is public knowledge. Draco Malfoy shouted loudly, straightening his posture. Lucius Malfoy. In front of me, two Hogwarts freshmen fighting, and attacking a student's parent. Are these your so-called rules? Professor McGonagall had returned. She stood there, her expression even more severe than Lucius Malfoy's. Lucius's hand froze. Professor McGonagall. My son could get hurt. Does Hogwarts recruit students with dangerous tendencies, even now? Lucius Malfoy immediately twisted the facts. But Professor McGonagall did not back down. She walked in front of Jakes and Mrs. Weasley, subtly shielding them. I will make my own judgment on the sequence of events. Based on what I understand, Draco Malfoy was the first to be insolent and attempt physical action. Jakes's wand merely made a legitimate defensive response. As for Molly, she was simply protecting her children. She paused, staring intensely at Lucius. Or perhaps you'd like me to invite Headmaster Dumbledore to personally discuss with you the issues of rules and threatening others in public. Dumbledore's name acted like an invisible spell. Lucius Malfoy's expression visibly stiffened. The hand gripping the serpent head cane tightened. He gave Jakes a deep look and let out a heavy snort. Very well. Let's go, Draco. He said no more, turning to descend the stairs. Draco dared not speak further, following his father hurriedly and miserably. Subsequently, the bookstore returned to its lively atmosphere. As if the farce had never occurred. Professor McGonagall then turned around to face Jakes and the Weasley family. Are you injured? No, Professor. Thank you. We're fine, Minerva, thank you for arriving in time. Molly sighed in relief and said gratefully. She turned to face Jakes with Ginny. Dear, thank you so much for just now. I am Molly Weasley, and this is Ginny. If it weren't for you, Draco Malfoy would probably have pushed his luck further. It's nothing. If he tries to bully me, I won't let him get away with it. He nodded in response. This made Molly smile. Are you also a Hogwarts freshman? Yes. Jakes nodded. That's wonderful. When the time comes, you can enroll with our Ron, so you two can keep each other company. Jakes smiled but didn't reply. Ron, one of the trio, and a troublemaker himself. After a brief chat, Mrs. Weasley still had to take the children to buy other things, so they said their goodbyes. Jakes remained where he was, holding the dark golden wand in his hand. The confusion in his heart grew clearer. The wand protected its master. Automatic protection. This exceeded his understanding of wands. It was full of proactive protectiveness. Could it possess the characteristic of protecting its master? To some extent. This represented immense power. The shopping in Diagon Alley concluded. Jakes and Professor McGonagall returned to the Leaky Cauldron. Stepping out of the Leaky Cauldron, they stood once again on that familiar street in London. Professor McGonagall stopped and turned around. This is where we part, Mr. Jakes. Your school supplies are complete. Next, you need to travel to King's Cross Station on your own. Jakes listened quietly. The Hogwarts Express train will be there, departing promptly at 11 o'clock on the morning of September 1st. You need to go to platform 9 3/4, which is between platform 9 and platform 10. Platform 9 3/4. Jakes displayed appropriate confusion. That's right. It looks like an ordinary dividing wall. You need to steady your trolley and walk straight toward it. Do you understand? I understand, Professor. Jakes nodded. Professor McGonagall cautioned. Be sure to arrive on time. Because the train waits for no one. I will. Then, I'll see you on September 1st, Mr. Jakes. See you at Hogwarts. The official start of school is approaching. There is only a short time left. Now, wands, textbooks, robes, and so on have all been purchased. Returning to the orphanage, the feeling has already changed. This place will soon become a thing of the past. Meanwhile, Hogwarts Castle. Headmaster's office. Dumbledore sat behind the massive desk. His silver beard sparkled under the candlelight. The office door was gently knocked upon. Professor McGonagall pushed the door open and entered. Come in, Minerva. Dumbledore's voice was gentle. At this moment, Professor McGonagall had just returned to Hogwarts. She hadn't had time to change out of the robes dusty from travel. A trace of solemnity was on her face. Albus, I need to talk to you immediately about that new student, Jakes. Dumbledore raised his head. The eyes behind his half-moon spectacles shone with brilliant light. Oh, it seems something unexpected happened during our new student procurement trip. Yes. Professor McGonagall took a deep breath. Then, she clearly recounted everything that had happened at Flourish and Blotts. The most crucial part was the self-activated protective behavior of the dark golden wand made of legendary wooden dragon heartstring. Dumbledore clearly sensed Professor McGonagall's shock. That wand chose Jakes. But I must say, this level of compatibility proves his talent. Furthermore, I have never heard of this kind of self-protection behavior. Interesting. Very interesting. Legendary wood, dragon heartstring, automatic protection. Dumbledore listened quietly. He spoke softly, as if savoring the words. This doesn't just signify excellent talent, Minerva. It also suggests that we underestimated him. A child with such potential, yet raised in a Muggle orphanage. His future is full of exciting variables. Dumbledore's tone was calm. As if recalling something that had been sealed away for many years. Just then, Professor McGonagall remembered another important matter. Also, Albus, regarding Jakes' scholarship application. Approved, of course. Hogwarts will never allow any child with talent and ambition to have their path to learning blocked by money. I fully agree to his application. And please tell him that I hope he fulfills his promise. Having received Dumbledore's consent, Professor McGonagall nodded. The matter was satisfactorily resolved. I will inform him as soon as possible. Subsequently, she briefly reported on a few other matters concerning the preparations for the new term, then rose and took her leave. A few days later, early morning, a barn owl tapped on the window of Jake's room and dropped off a letter. Jakes opened the envelope. Inside was Professor McGonagall's neat handwriting. The letter clearly stated, Dear Mr. Jakes, following careful consideration by the Academic Review Committee, you have successfully been granted the Hogwarts Scholarship for this semester. Mr. Albus Dumbledore, principal of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, has agreed to grant you this subsidy. We hope this allows you to focus on your studies without worry. Sincerely. Regards. Minerva McGonagall. Afterwards, the letter emphasized that he needed to fulfill his promise. Study magic diligently. Achieve excellent grades. Jake smiled. He calmly folded the letter and carefully put it into his suitcase. His financial worries had completely vanished. Now, he could fully concentrate on exploring his own power. Subsequently, he took out Standard Book of Spells, Grade 1 and Theories of Magic. He began flipping through them, regarding the nature of magic. Regarding the pronunciation and hand movements of spells. He immersed himself in the technical terminology. Suddenly, a sudden change occurred. Buzz. The dark golden wand beside him emitted a powerful tremor. At the same time, the system began to tremble. Current template, 41% integrated. Below, the first item, marked with question marks at the very top, had undergone an earth-shattering change. Magic power, SSS. This was another SSS level. Simultaneously, a massive, violent surge of energy awoke from slumber and burst forth with a boom. This power did not come from the wand, but originated from within himself, causing his strength to begin growing. After the shock subsided, he felt a surge of pleasant surprise. SSS level magic power. What powerful strength. Is this just the tip of the iceberg contained within the Grindelwald template? As expected, he was able to stand on equal footing with Dumbledore back then. He lowered his head. His hands trembled slightly due to the surging power. Jake's attention was completely focused. Entirely concentrated on one thing. Magic power. SSS level. This meant his power was extremely formidable. He took out the introductory spell book and turned to the first, and most basic, practical spell. Levitation Charm, Wingardium Leviosa. Shall I try it? Although practicing magic alone without instruction is dangerous. But it doesn't matter. He remembered. Hermione had trained by herself. And then fixed Harry's glasses on the train. Subsequently, based on his understanding, the spell itself was not complicated. The key lay in the wrist movement, the incantation's tone. And, most importantly, concentrating the magic output. Then, he gripped the dark golden wand tightly. And began his first attempt. Wingardium Leviosa. However, a torrent of magic power suddenly poured out from within him. The quill on the desk did not float up. Snap. A loud noise suddenly rang out. But it instantly exploded. The pen shaft turned to dust, and the feathers became scattered fragments. Jake's SSS level magic power truly cannot be underestimated. This wasn't casting a spell at all. This was demolition. Subsequently, he took a deep breath, not feeling discouraged. Instead, he began a second attempt. This time, he was more careful. Wingardium Leviosa. The magic power was carefully drawn out. But it became extremely unstable as it left the wand tip. There was no explosion. No movement. It was still a failure. Jakes closed his eyes. He no longer rushed to wave the wand. He began to feel the flow of magic power within his body. A certain trait belonging to the Grindelwald template. A desire for control bordering on extreme arrogance. A moment later, he opened his eyes. Gripping the wand tightly, he focused intensely on that simple goal. To make the quill float. His wrist flicked with a natural and fluid arc. Wingardium Leviosa. A miracle occurred. The quill trembled slightly. Then, freed from some invisible restraint, it floated up from the floor. Success. Jake's pupils widened slightly. He succeeded in just 3 attempts. Of course, this was all thanks to the talent brought by the template. The levitation charm. He mastered it so easily. September 1st. The sky over London remained gray. Jack stood at the entrance of the orphanage. At his feet was the slightly worn suitcase. It contained all of his belongings, including his Hogwarts textbooks and that legendary wooden wand. Madame Alice looked reluctant to part. When you get to school, make sure you take good care of yourself. Eat on time, and get along well with your classmates. Jax listened quietly. He showed no impatience toward her rambling. I will, Madame Alice. Please take care of yourself too. He said nothing more. He turned around and merged into the crowd, heading toward his destination, King's Cross Station. It was time to set off. King's Cross Station. Between Platform 9 and Platform 10. Jax glanced over the incredibly solid dividing wall. He adjusted his trolley and took a deep breath. He accelerated, charging straight toward that wall. The next moment, the view suddenly opened up. A deep red steam engine was waiting. This was the Hogwarts Express. This is newer than I imagined. It doesn't look that worn out. Then, a familiar voice rang out. Jax. Mrs. Weasley, accompanied by her red-headed children, was waving vigorously at him. Standing beside her was a red-haired boy of a similar age, whose face was covered in freckles. Dear. It's wonderful to see you again. This is Ron, our youngest, who is also starting school this year. Molly nudged Ron. Ron, this is Jax, the boy I told you about. Ron scratched the back of his head, his eyes full of admiration. Ginny told me. You stood up to the Malfoys at Flourish and Blots. That was so cool. Jax looked at Harry Potter's future best friend. He replied calmly. It was nothing. The admiration in Ron's eyes deepened. Mrs. Weasley looked at the two boys. A relieved smile appeared on her face. All right, children, hurry up and get on the train. Find a good compartment. Remember to look out for each other. Jax and Ron boarded the Hogwarts Express. The carriages were already quite crowded, filled with all sorts of noisy sounds. After slipping away, Jax looked for an empty compartment by himself. Before long, a girl with slightly curly brown hair stood at the doorway. She was clutching several books. Hello, excuse me, is there a free seat here? Jax nodded. Yes, please sit down. Hermione began to introduce herself. My name is Hermione Granger. Jax. He answered plainly. The next second, Hermione's eyes immediately lit up. Jax. The Jax who used a spell in Flourish and Blots. Regarding this title, Jax was not surprised. Flourish and Blots had been very crowded at the time. He just hadn't seen Hermione. Hermione continued excitedly. I spent the whole summer getting familiar with the textbooks. Theoretically, casting spells is absolutely fine. I can demonstrate for you, let's see if you can do it. Without waiting for Jax to answer, she deliberately snapped a quill in half. Then she waved her wand. Reparo. The next second, the broken quill immediately returned to normal. Jax smiled slightly. He said nothing. Aren't you going to try? All right. Subsequently, he drew his own wand. The dark gold wand made Hermione pause. With a single incantation, the broken quill was restored. It even looked brand new. The expression on Hermione's face changed rapidly. From initial challenge to surprise, then disbelief, and finally, she pursed her lips. She felt that all her effort over the summer seemed so pale and ineffective. She opened her mouth. She originally wanted to ask him how long he had practiced, and how he had done it. But in the end, she abruptly gathered her books and left. I'm going to check the other compartments. All right, goodbye. Silence returned to the compartment. Jax sensed the magic within him. His practice during this time hadn't been in vain. His control over magic was getting better and better. He cast his gaze outside the window. The Hogwarts Express was speeding past the fields. The destination was getting closer. The silence in the compartment did not last long. A burst of noise and crying came from the corridor. Please don't bully him, a clumsy boy shouted tearfully. Immediately following this, Draco Malfoy sneered. Look what we have here. A toad. Are disgusting things like this allowed on the train? Neville Longbottom anxiously tried to jump up, trying to snatch the toad Goyle was holding over his head. Crabbe and Goyle both burst into laughter. Please put down Neville's Trevor. How dare you do something so bullying? What? Wasn't the lesson Jax taught you back at the bookshop enough? Suddenly, Hermione stepped out, directly hitting a sore spot for Malfoy. Malfoy's face flushed red. Oh, who are you, you interfering little mudblood? This isn't your business. He stared at Hermione contemptuously, his eyes full of disgust. He then pushed Goyle. The toad in Goyle's hands nearly slipped out. This startled Neville, who lunged forward and missed, nearly tripping. Trevor. The train sped along the tracks. But the atmosphere in the corridor froze. Malfoy wore a mocking expression. After bullying Neville for a while, he prepared to leave with Crabbe and Goyle. Stop right there. Do you think this is over? Hermione gritted her teeth. Malfoy chuckled lightly. Oh, you filthy mudblood. What do you want? An apology, of course. Hogwarts doesn't allow this kind of behavior. Hermione had read the school rules. She felt Draco Malfoy's actions warranted punishment. However, Draco shrugged. Apology. As far as I'm concerned, you're not worthy. Just as he was about to leave, he passed the compartment where Jax was sitting. The two exchanged glances. Malfoy, however, stopped. Jax, don't you just love showing off? No Professor McGonagall this time, so you don't dare step in. Jax's expression hardened. His voice was cold. Malfoy. My patience is limited. You've already disturbed me. If you continue acting like a hyena, I don't mind making you perform another floor-level tumble in front of everyone. Malfoy's pale face flushed, recalling the incident at the bookshop. You dare threaten me? Yes, so what? The next second, Jax raised his wand, without uttering a spell, but it was extremely threatening. Instantly, Draco habitually flinched in fear. He stumbled backward, falling onto Crabbe and Goyle. Scared. If you're scared, clear off, you're an embarrassment. After that, Draco Malfoy and his trio ran away. Hermione curved her lips, trying not to laugh. Neville, startled, shrank back. He was now clutching his toad tightly. In the corridor, peace returned. The commotion temporarily subsided. Neville Longbottom came over, holding his toad. His movements were cautious. There were still fresh tear stains on his face. Thank you. You saved Trevor. Hermione hurried over. Are you all right, Neville? Thank you, Jakes. Jakes looked at the slow boy from his memories. Regarding Neville Longbottom, he actually had quite a story. His parents, both Aurors, were brutally tortured with the Crucio curse by the Death Eater Bellatrix Lestrange. They went mad, didn't they? Pitiable. But at least he still had his parents. After a few seconds of silence, his voice still lacked warmth. You're welcome. Remember, in this world, the only one who can always protect you is yourself. Strive to become stronger. Otherwise, you will always live in fear, always be bullied. After he finished speaking, Neville stood frozen in place. His expression was thoughtful. I understand. Hermione was startled. Jakes, your words. Then. Jakes didn't pay attention. He didn't care how the others viewed his attitude. He simply and decisively closed the door. After a long journey, the Hogwarts Express finally stopped. This was Hogsmeade Station. Night had already fallen. The air was bone-chillingly cold. Then a booming voice rang out. First years. First years over here. All first years get into the boats. No more than 4 to a boat. Hagrid guided the first years to gather by the shore of the Black Lake. Many people were already in the row of swaying small boats. Jakes casually boarded an empty boat, waiting for the boat to automatically glide across the surface of the Black Lake. The next second, his vision suddenly opened up. Hogwarts Castle revealed itself in its entirety. It was almost as dreamlike as he had imagined. Even Jakes looked up. His heart was deeply shaken. Then he saw a familiar figure. Professor McGonagall stood there in emerald green robes. Her expression was as stern as ever. Welcome to Hogwarts. The start of term feast is about to begin. But before that, you have an important task. Follow me. The massive oak doors slowly opened. Jakes followed the first years into the magnificent Great Hall. Around the 4 long house tables, the older students had already gathered. We've finally arrived at Hogwarts, Harry. Harry Potter. As the noise came from behind, Jakes looked back. The classic scene unfolded. Draco's attempt to extend an olive branch to Harry Potter failed. All day, he had lost face countless times. The Sorting Hat. It twitched its brim, cleared its throat. Then it began to describe the 4 houses. Gryffindor, brave and intelligent. Hufflepuff, kind and innocent. Ravenclaw, witty and clever. Slytherin, ambitious. So, amidst everyone's anticipation, the sorting officially began. Abbott, Hannah. Hannah almost ran up, sitting down nervously. The Sorting Hat barely touched her. It shrieked almost without hesitation. Hufflepuff. Many people had already been sorted. As expected, the Golden Trio all went into Gryffindor. Next, an arrogant blonde boy stepped onto the platform. Draco Malfoy. Slytherin. Applause erupted from the second table on the left. Malfoy proudly walked towards the Slytherin table. He didn't forget to cast a provocative glance in Jake's direction. Finally, the Sorting Hat called out a name. Jake's. Jake's expression was calm and unruffled. He walked forward with steady steps and sat on the four-legged stool. A faint murmur of discussion rose in the great hall. Many curious gazes focused on him. Rumors about Flourish and Blots. About Draco Malfoy being afraid of him on the train. This seemed to have given him some notoriety. So, Professor McGonagall placed the Sorting Hat on his head. Jake's heard the Sorting Hat's echo. Very special. Such a powerful will contained within such a young body. Such a profound inner self, with a clear desire for power. You possess great ambition. Then, the Sorting Hat's voice paused. In this crucial decision, it clearly shouted that name. Slytherin. Congratulations, you are in Slytherin. Instantly. Jake's was stunned. What? Slytherin? Are you serious? I'm Muggle-born, and you put me in Slytherin. I'm so smart, I love to study, and I wasn't put in Ravenclaw. Don't you know about my agreement with Dumbledore? Let me study. The Sorting Hat lowered its voice. Hee hee. Of course it's not wrong, the Sorting Hat is never wrong. As the voice fell, the Slytherin table erupted in applause. Helplessly. He knew he had to accept the current situation. Jake's calmly stood up and walked to the Slytherin table. He thought to himself, Slytherin. Is it influenced by the Grindelwald template? The pursuit of ambition and power, it doesn't conflict with the core of the Grindelwald template. In fact, this might be an excellent cover. At the long table decorated in green and silver, Jake sat down in silence. Across from him, Draco Malfoy's eyes were filled with shock and anger. And a feeling that his territory had been invaded. HMPH. A clear snort came from across the table. Draco Malfoy barely touched the food in front of him. His pale face was taut. He deliberately slammed his silver goblet down. It's truly unimaginable. Now even this table is starting to be tainted with an unclean scent. Crabbe and Goyle let out hoarse chuckles. Jake's movements as he cut his steak didn't pause for a moment. He didn't even look up. Complete disregard. Malfoy's breathing became ragged. Hey, I'm talking to you. You. Jake's finally looked up. His black pupils were calm and unruffled. His voice was very steady. Are you talking to me? Sorry, I didn't notice. After all, usually only flies buzz around when others are eating. Malfoy's face instantly turned red. You dare. Draco. A slightly calmer voice came from beside Malfoy. It was an older Slytherin. He shook his head slightly, signaling Malfoy to mind the occasion. Malfoy glared fiercely at Jake's. He leaned back forcefully in his chair, crossing his arms. The faint whispers around them could be heard. Is that him? He made Malfoy a mudblood. Jake's was unaffected by these discussions. Instead, he slowly chewed his food. Thinking to himself. The real show was just beginning. The feast ended. The prefect led the Slytherin first years back. They passed through winding corridors and headed downward, facing the giant serpent carved into the stone wall. The prefect spoke. The password is, pure blood. The stone wall silently slid open. The Slytherin common room appeared before them. It was incredibly gloomy. This elicited quiet gasps of wonder from the first years. Draco Malfoy immediately claimed a spot next to the fireplace. Accompanied by Crabbe and Goyle, he deliberately raised his voice. We've finally returned to where we belong. At least this place looks much cleaner. Unlike the places certain people have been. He glanced around, his eyes finally settling on Jake's, who had just walked in. A mocking curve appeared at the corner of his mouth. That's right, Draco. Crabbe chimed in with a silly grin. Goyle also nodded along. Jake's completely ignored this group. He was walking toward the window, wanting to see the view of the Black Lake. But Malfoy was relentless. He took 2 steps forward and blocked his path. I said, what shady method did you use to sneak in here? Mudblood. The common room instantly fell silent. All eyes focused on them. Because, mudblood, was truly too defamatory. Moreover, this was the Slytherin common room, where pure bloods reigned supreme. Jake still showed no anger on his face. Only a cold, scrutinizing gaze. Entering Slytherin relies on ambition and ability. Not like a peacock, who is useless except for showing off its innate plumage. Or are you saying, You think you have nothing else to offer besides the Malfoy surname. You. Malfoy was completely enraged. Insulting him was bad enough. Insulting the honor of the House of Malfoy was even worse. I'll make you pay for your insolence. My father. Your father. Jakes interrupted him, a near smile curving his lips. It seems you can't even speak a complete sentence without him. Malfoy was too furious to speak. He decided. He prepared to strike. But he immediately hesitated. He knew that the other boy's wand was not to be trifled with. What's wrong? You want to fight, but you don't even know a single dark spell. Does that deserve to be the glory of a pure-blood wizard? If you have no means and won't engage in a battle of wits, then step aside. Jakes no longer felt like viewing the Black Lake. He prepared to return to the dormitory. Malfoy stared intensely at his retreating back. He gritted his teeth, unable to utter a single word. Following the nameplate, Jakes found his dormitory and pushed the door open. The room wasn't large, and it was hung with dark green drapes. At this moment, a boy with light brown hair, who looked a little shy, was standing awkwardly by the bed. He clearly tensed up. Hello. My name is Miles. Jakes. He walked to his own bed and put down his trunk. Just now, outside, Miles seemed to want to say something but didn't dare to ask. It's nothing. Just a little noise. His tone was flat. He said no more and began organizing his belongings. However, the other boy continued to observe him. As for this unfamiliar roommate, he had no interest in befriending him, but no need to antagonize him either. Keeping distance and not interfering with each other was best. Miles also seemed to stop trying to strike up a conversation. Subsequently, Miles picked up a copy of Magical Theory and began reading. Then, two other boys entered. One was tall and thin with black hair, named Avery. The other was slightly chubby with brown hair, named Cade. As soon as the two entered, their eyes first fell on Jakes. Then they approached Miles. They huddled together, whispering something. A hint of awkwardness permeated the air. Jakes, as usual, prepared to pick up Standard Book of Spells, Beginner. Miles gathered his courage and spoke softly. Jakes, excuse me. Jakes raised an eyebrow slightly. What is it? About that boy just now, the one with blonde hair. That insulting word he used, are you a muggle too? Of course. I am too. And so are they. It seems we are all somewhat different. He glanced at Avery and Cade. The two nodded slightly, and silence fell. Avery took over the conversation. His tone carried a hint of self-mockery and helplessness. My parents are both doctors, and they know nothing about magic. When I received my acceptance letter, they thought it was someone's prank. Cade also murmured his agreement. A wry smile appeared on his face. My dad drives a truck for a living, my mom is an elementary school teacher. I still haven't figured out what's going on. Miles lowered his head, looking at his shoes. I received the letter at a normal public library, my grandma is a librarian. Jakes's gaze swept across their faces. They carried a slight unease. He understood. This dormitory was practically a gathering point for misfits within Slytherin. Jakes spoke, his voice still calm, breaking the slightly heavy atmosphere. So, do you feel that you were insulted just now? That you were targeted because of a single word? Miles froze for a moment, then quickly shook his head. No. That's not what I meant. You proved that people like us are not inferior. Perhaps. He had learned about the standards of Slytherin. Mudblood had no status whatsoever. Avery also spoke up. Earlier today on the Hogwarts Express, Malfoy and his hangers-on kept looking at us with that kind of expression. I heard you put him in his place. Honestly, it was satisfying. As he spoke, the corner of his mouth involuntarily curled upward. Cade also nodded vigorously. Jakes looked at them and remained silent for a moment. He suddenly felt that identity issues would greatly affect him in Slytherin. Don't overthink it. Strength is the only truth. Focus your attention where it needs to be. Once you become powerful, the gossip of others won't change the fact that you belong here. He picked up the book and continued turning the pages. The conversation ended. But the atmosphere in the dormitory had quietly shifted. The layer of estrangement and awkwardness seemed to have melted away significantly. Avery and Cade exchanged a look and also picked up their textbooks. Miles quietly let out a breath of relief. A look of reassurance appeared on his lips. In any case, Jake's words made a lot of sense. Since they had come to this school of magic, they should work hard and study magic. Early morning. Outside the dungeons of Hogwarts. The Slytherin first years walked through the castle towards the greenhouses behind it. Herbology class. They would attend it with Hufflepuff House. The greenhouse was filled with the mixed scent of soil and exotic plants. At this moment, Professor Sprout, a witch wearing a patched hat, welcomed them warmly. She pointed to several pots of plants on the long table in the first row. Today, we need to familiarize ourselves with some basic magical plants. For example, this one, Dittany. Its juice has strong healing properties. In the Slytherin group, Jakes listened quietly. His gaze swept over the various oddly shaped plants. Mandrake, devil's snare. So if you are injured, you can use the juice of this plant for treatment. Come, all of you try it. Of course, you just need to feel it, you don't necessarily have to injure yourselves. Professor Sprout began the practical session. She had the students start working themselves. A Hufflepuff student approached clumsily. Accidentally, they nearly knocked over a flower pot. I didn't mean to, Professor. It's all right, be careful, dear. Behind them, Malfoy's faint scoff was heard, along with the mockery of other Slytherin students. After all, they believed that Hufflepuff students were inherently the dullest. As for Jakes, he observed gently according to the professor's guidance. He didn't show any excessive reaction. Professor Sprout cast a look of approval at him. You did very well. Your name is Jakes, correct? Yes, Professor. HMPH. By the end of this class, Jakes had a preliminary understanding of several basic magical plants. In the afternoon, Charms class. Located on a higher floor of the castle, the classroom was bright and spacious. The short Professor Flitwick stood on a stack of books to teach the class. Welcome, everyone, to Charms class. Today, we will learn something very practical, and the most fundamental of basics. That is the levitation charm. He wrote the spell on the blackboard. Wingardium Leviosa. And explained the wand movement and pronunciation essentials in detail. Now, please take out your wands and try it on the feather in front of you. The classroom immediately filled with the sound of chanting spells and the whooshing of wands being waved. Many students focused intently as they waved their wands. But the feathers merely wobbled. Or showed no reaction at all. Some feathers even emitted a wisp of smoke. Malfoy waved his wand pretentiously, but his feather remained motionless. Useless spell. Why not teach a fire spell instead? On the other side, Jakes picked up his wand. He simply made a movement as natural as breathing. And chanted the spell. Wingardium Leviosa. Silver light flashed from the tip of his legendary wood wand. In front of him, the white feather gracefully ascended into the air. It was perfectly steady, without the slightest tremor. It even slowly spun around once. Oh, wonderful. Professor Flitwick was so excited he nearly fell off his stack of books. He clapped his hands. Perfect. Mr. Jakes. 10 points to Slytherin. Standard movement, precise magic control. I haven't seen such a perfect levitation charm from a first year in many years. Instantly, the entire class's attention focused on him. Falling upon Jakes and his floating feather. Malfoy's face instantly turned dark as water. He fiercely jabbed his wand at his own feather, cursing under his breath. This is impossible. He must have cheated. Of course. Because, the system light screen flashed. Jakes diverted some of his attention to the system. Officially acquired spell instruction. Charms ability panel unlocked. Charms ability. SSS. The column representing Charms ability. The original gray question mark was replaced by the same, SSS. Another SSS level. Ranking alongside magic power and dark arts talent. Jakes understood internally. The Grindelwald template. Its potential in the field of spells is indeed top-notch. He then smiled knowingly. With a gentle wave of his wand, the feather silently descended. Moreover, Professor Flitwick was still praising him excitedly. Remarkable, Mr. Jakes, truly remarkable talent. News of Jakes' performance in Charms class immediately spread throughout the school. Did you hear? That muggle born in Slytherin was the first to perfectly cast the levitation charm. Professor Flitwick was ecstatic. Merlin, Slytherin, and a Mudblood. Various discussions continued to ferment. Especially the older Slytherin students were somewhat surprised. It was already surprising that a Muggle-born could enter pure-blood supremacist Slytherin. Now, even a Muggle-born wizard showed astonishing talent in charms class. This shattered the understanding of too many people. In the Slytherin common room, the atmosphere was subtle. The older students looked at Jakes with scrutiny. Some even openly displayed contempt and exclusion. In a small group, these people were almost all members of the sacred 28 families. Slytherin's glory is being tainted. A cold voice spoke up. It belonged to a 7th-year prefect. Just seeking attention with a bit of cleverness. Another voice echoed. Draco Malfoy scoffed even more. What pathetic blood. He only learned some common spells, not profound dark arts. The prefect chuckled softly. Exactly. Malfoy, you surely won't let him off the hook so easily, will you? A hint of arrogance flashed in Malfoy's eyes. Of course not. Regarding these rumors, Jakes showed no reaction. He continued to attend classes on time. Because he clearly knew his goal. Power. The Grindelwald template. Learning. A few days later. Around the corner of a corridor. Ron Weasley awkwardly stopped Jakes. Hey, Jakes. Jakes stopped and looked at him. Ron scratched his red hair, looking indignant. I heard. Those nasty things. That Malfoy guy is spreading them everywhere. He deliberately wants to humiliate you. Regarding the recent stirring caused by Malfoy. It was nothing more than spreading rumors that there was something suspicious about Jakes' bloodline and his charms ability. After all, how could a mudblood possess such high learning talent? Jakes must have used some method. Jakes' expression remained unchanged. I know. Ron seemed surprised by his calmness. You can't just let it go. You have to teach him a lesson. Defeat him completely in front of everyone. Then he won't have anything to say. He waved his fists, appearing more agitated than the person concerned. Jakes looked at him and shook his head. And then, Ron paused, then everyone will know you are much stronger than him. Defeating him is easy. Jakes' tone was flat, but afterward, I would violate school rules due to private dueling, be deducted points, or even receive detention. Trading my future and time for momentary satisfaction, just to punish an insignificant person. Do you think that's worth it? Ron opened his mouth. He wanted to say something to refute, but found himself speechless. But, are you just going to let him continue being arrogant? His arrogance is his business. My strength is mine. There's no need to confuse the two. Jakes turned around, ready to leave. Without the slightest hesitation. Ron stood rooted, looking at Jakes retreating back with confusion. What a strange guy. But, he seems to have a point. The charms classroom. Sunlight streamed in through the tall windows. Professor Flitwick stood on his stack of books, enthusiastically explaining the essentials of the light spell. Therefore, a steady and determined will is the key to maintaining the light of Lumos. He concluded shrilly. Most students were trying hard to emit a steady ball of light from the tip of their wands. Miles's light was already quite bright. The lights of the other two roommates flickered on and off. Malfoy was flicking his wand impatiently. The light looked like it might extinguish at any moment. Just then, a calm voice rang out, breaking the hum in the classroom. It was Jakes. He had successfully condensed a stable, soft, and bright ball of light at the tip of his wand. It was bright enough to illuminate the entire charms classroom. Professor Flitwick. I have a question. Everyone's gaze was drawn to him. Professor Flitwick also looked at him curiously. Please speak, Mr. Jakes. I would like to ask, does a wizard's magical ability, or rather, their talent for learning spells, have a relationship with the purity of their bloodline? And has this statement been verified in the magic world? As soon as the question was posed, the classroom instantly fell silent. Everyone understood what the question was aimed at. Draco Malfoy's face instantly flushed red. He glared fiercely at Jakes. As for Professor Flitwick, he clearly hadn't expected such a sharp and sensitive question. It caught him off guard, making him adjust his glasses. And he struggled to choose his words carefully. Well. In the magic world, there are indeed some, traditional views. But as far as I know, There is currently no rigorous, authoritative academic magic research that can clearly prove that the spell talent of pure-blood wizards is universally and necessarily superior to that of half-blood wizards, or Muggle-born wizards. He paused, then continued to explain. Magical ability relies more on an individual's own magic power, concentration, comprehension, and diligence. Historically, the bloodline composition of many great wizards, has been diverse. This answer was like a silent slap in the face. Although no names were mentioned, it undoubtedly struck hard at the faces of those who constantly spoke of pure blood glory. Especially Malfoy. He felt his cheeks burning. All his previous arrogance and superiority seemed so ridiculous and hollow. Miles's eyes lit up, and his gaze towards Jake's held a new measure of approval. He actually dared to ask that. Having received his answer, Jakes nodded slightly to Professor Flitwick. Thank you, Professor. I think I understand now. My future will be bright. He said no more. The ball of light in his hand remained steadily lit. This single statement directly proved that his talent far surpassed that of certain others. The Q&A session in Charms class quickly spread throughout the castle again. Did you hear? Jakes, that's Slytherin. He directly questioned the theory of blood purity in class. Professor Flitwick said there's no evidence that pure bloods are superior. Malfoy's face turned green then. Draco Malfoy felt he had become the laughingstock of the entire school. Shame and indignation. Embarrassment. Burning rage. He finally couldn't hold back. The next afternoon, after potion class, there were still many Slytherin and Gryffindor students around. Malfoy blocked Jakes, who was preparing to leave. Jakes. Malfoy's voice was slightly distorted with excitement. His pale face was flushed crimson. I challenge you to a duel. A fair wizard duel. Tonight, in the trophy room. To the side. Snape, watching with cold eyes, first swept his dark gaze indifferently over Jakes, then settled it on Malfoy. His voice was low and smooth, carrying obvious favoritism. It seems that the internal dynamics of Slytherin require appropriate motivation. I permit this duel. Perhaps this will allow certain people to realize their place more clearly. His tacit approval undoubtedly gave Malfoy a shot of confidence. He didn't even wait for Jakes to agree. He immediately accepted the challenge. Fine, no problem. I'll be waiting for you. Just make sure you don't get scared and fail to show up. Subsequently, Jakes left, holding his books. However, the news quickly reached the ears of the deputy principal. Professor McGonagall's voice rang out in the corridor. Nonsense. The school strictly prohibits unauthorized dueling. Mr. Jakes, I will not allow you to participate in such a dangerous, rule-breaking activity. She came directly to find Jakes. Although she was explicitly forbidding it. Her eyes held an unmistakable look of protection. She was well aware of Snape's bias. She didn't want this outstanding Muggle-born student to suffer. Even if he absolutely won, Jakes would not gain respect in Slytherin. But Jakes's expression was serious. He looked at Professor McGonagall and spoke calmly. Professor, I accept Mr. Malfoy's challenge. I am not concerned about getting hurt. Professor, evasion does not solve problems, it only encourages further provocation. A fair duel might be the fastest way to end this pointless dispute. He paused and added, I will abide by the dueling rules and stop before serious harm is done. Furthermore, I am willing to bear any resulting loss of house points. Moreover, Professor Snape will be present, Professor McGonagall, and you will come too, won't you? Professor McGonagall looked at his steady gaze. Her strict expression softened slightly. She finally compromised. Very well. Tonight at 8 o'clock, I will personally serve as the referee. Any violation of dueling etiquette will be severely punished. 8 o'clock at night. The trophy room. In front of the long glass cabinets filled with trophies and shields. Professor McGonagall stood in the center, her expression solemn. Snape was expressionless, like a black bat. Students who had heard the news and rushed over crowded around. They were all Slytherin and Gryffindor students. In fact, this included the trio of Harry, Ron, and Hermione. Even Neville was watching nervously from within the Gryffindor crowd. As for his roommates, they were all squeezed into a corner. So you did come. In that case, I also want to question you. I hope you're still so defiant in a little while. The two stared intently at each other. The duel begins. Professor McGonagall announced loudly. Wingardium Leviosa. Malfoy launched his attack almost instantly. He attempted to use the levitation charm to attack Jakes. Jakes didn't even move his feet. He flicked his wrist. Protega. An invisible barrier instantly sprang up in front of him. Malfoy's spell hit it and dissipated into nothingness. What? Malfoy was stunned. He hadn't expected the opponent to master the shield charm so quickly. Wasn't that a spell for slightly older students? Lumos. He shouted again, and the spell's light intensified slightly. Jakes remained standing in place. He lightly tapped his wand. Incendio. A dazzling red flame, arriving later but striking first, accurately hit Malfoy's wand. Whoosh. The sparks burned Malfoy's wand, causing it to fly out of his hand. And then it fell directly to the floor. The entire process took only a few seconds. Malfoy's hand was now empty. He stood frozen in place, his face filled with disbelief. The entire room was silent. Then a huge uproar erupted. Merlin. Why does the spell he used have such great power? When did he learn the fire spell? Hermione covered her mouth. Ron excitedly pumped his fist. Only the Slytherin students' faces grew gloomier in the shadows. A hint of surprise flashed in Professor McGonagall's eyes, but she quickly regained her solemnity. The victor has been decided. Mr. Jakes wins. Do you wish to continue? Continue. He would only be asking for trouble. Malfoy snatched his wand back up. Lowering his head, he pushed through the crowd under everyone's gaze. Then, in disgrace, he rushed out of the trophy room. Jakes put away his wand. He didn't even spare a glance for the people around him. He bowed slightly to Professor McGonagall, then turned and left. His figure, silhouetted against the trophy cabinets, was tall and proud. This duel. He didn't just win. He won cleanly, swiftly, and indisputably. Outside of Slytherin, his reputation among the entire first year would likely be completely different. Jax's name was no longer solely associated with the contradictory labels of Muggle-born and Slytherin. It was now linked to strength, composure, and being untouchable. Draco Malfoy had unexpectedly fallen silent. He no longer openly provoked Jax. He stopped making sarcastic remarks. He would even subconsciously avoid Jax's gaze when they met in the corridors. He still hung out with his cronies, Crabbe and Goyle. Only their conversations rarely involved Jax. One night, Jax returned to the Slytherin dormitory. His roommate, Miles, was curled up on his bed. His hair was messy, and his wizard robes were stained with dust. There was a slight bruise near his eye. Jax took a look. Were you bullied? His words were very direct, pointing out Miles's predicament. Jax had guessed correctly. They cornered me in the broom cupboard, saying I didn't deserve to be in Slytherin. Jax sighed silently. Did you fight back? Miles was silent for a moment. I want to learn to be like you. After all, the prefects won't deal with this sort of thing, and telling Professor Snape, the head of house. I wouldn't dare. He shivered. He seemed to be imagining the consequences, which made him even more afraid. Jax turned and looked at Miles. You're smart. Telling Snape is the most foolish choice. He won't sympathize with you, he'll just think you're weak and a disgrace to Slytherin. The consequences might be worse than being bullied. Miles's face went pale. Then, what should I do? Jax walked up to him. His black eyes were devoid of emotion. Either endure it until they get bored. Or, become strong enough yourself, so strong that they dare not provoke you again. There is no third path. The cold words struck Miles hard. He lowered his head. His shoulders trembled slightly. He understood. The final choice was to be like Jax. To defeat those guys fair and square. Thank you. Jax said nothing more. He turned around and continued sorting his things. On the weekend, in an empty classroom, Jax was practicing spells. A small cluster of flames hovered in front of him. The orange-red flames burned steadily. This was the fire-making spell, Incendio, which Jax had learned from books in the library. Meanwhile, on the other side, Miles stood not far away, watching enviously. He tightly gripped his own wand. Jax, could I try that? He asked, gathering his courage. Jax glanced at him. You can. Focus your will and visualize the shape of the flame. The magical output must be steady, don't rush it. Miles nodded vigorously. He took a deep breath. and nervously waved his wand at an empty spot. Incendio. PFF'd. A soft sound. A faint wisp of black smoke emerged from the tip of his wand. But not even a spark appeared. Refusing to give up, he tried again. Incendio. This time, a few sporadic sparks sputtered out. But they instantly died away. Miles was a little discouraged. How could this be? I clearly did exactly what you told me. Jax extinguished his own cluster of flames. Imagination. Magic follows your intention, not rote memorization of the spell. Miles's face flushed red, and he tried again. Incendio. This time, a small, unstable yellow flame suddenly shot out. This startled him immediately, causing his wand to shake. The next second, the flame vanished instantly. Miles was pale with fright. I got it. But I still can't control it. Jax, however, smiled. Control requires practice, and also a bit of talent. Not everyone can easily master every spell. He offered no comfort. Merely stating a fact. After all, he possessed the Grindelwald template. The next second, Miles gripped his wand tightly. His mindset had become much calmer. He prepared to try again. That's right. Since their last conversation, Miles had shamelessly stuck close to Jax. Firstly, to protect himself. Secondly, to learn spells from Jax. And he had achieved some results. The peaceful days continued for a while. Ron Weasley and Harry mysteriously pulled Jax aside in a corridor one day. The redhead's expression was strange. He lowered his voice. Hey, listen up. I heard something about Malfoy. Jax looked at him, gesturing for him to continue. That guy has been unusually quiet lately, right? I heard him whispering with Crabbe and Goyle in a corner, and it seems like they aren't planning revenge on you. He paused, as if he found what he was about to say hard to believe. It seems like they're discussing how to recruit you. Jax raised an eyebrow. For the first time, an expression of absurdity and speechlessness crossed his face. Recruit me? Yes. Harry nodded emphatically. I heard it too. Pansy Parkinson was there too. Malfoy was saying stuff like, Slytherin needs unity, strength deserves respect, and other rubbish like that. He also said. Ron seemed reluctant to say it. Said what? Jax frowned slightly. He said, perhaps, he could become an important member of our side. But only if he understands his place and knows who the real leader is. The air was silent for a few seconds. Jax looked at Ron's earnest face relaying the message. He suddenly found it amusing. He had thought Malfoy's silence meant he was gathering strength. Or perhaps he had finally learned to assess the situation. He hadn't expected that the other party's thought process would veer toward trying to make him his subordinate. He wants to be the boss. Looks like it. Harry agreed, confirming he hadn't misheard. Ron shrugged. What do you think? If he actually invites you, would you agree? Jax didn't answer directly. He looked out the corridor window. The distant black lake shimmered under the sun. He will soon understand. Some people are destined not to be recruited. He withdrew his gaze. Then he nodded to Ron and Harry. It was his way of thanking them for the message. He then turned and left. His back was straight and tall, carrying a gradually emerging, inviolable sharpness. Malfoy actually thought he could make Jax his subordinate by trying to recruit him. His ambition was great, but ridiculous. After all, Jax's path had never required him to rely on anyone. The setback in Charms class did not make Miles give up entirely. The humiliation of being bullied was deeply rooted in his heart. And Jax's words echoed repeatedly in his mind. Become strong enough yourself. So he practiced the spell again and again. Incendio. Failure. Another failure. Although the flames that occasionally burst forth would quickly extinguish. Finally, one evening, after potions class had ended, he was cornered by those same few people in a secluded corridor. Hey, Miles, didn't you know to run away when you saw us today? Filthy mudblood, don't dirty our path. The leader was the older student who had bullied him before. His face carried a mocking expression. Miles took a step back. His back pressed against the cold wall. His heart hammered wildly. I didn't. The person stepped closer. It seems the last lesson wasn't painful enough. Fear clutched at Miles's throat. But at the same time, a long-suppressed fury, combined with the wand movements of the spell he had practiced countless times, surged up instantly. He almost instinctively whipped out his wand and pointed it at the other person. Incendio. This time, it was no longer just a few sparks. A fist-sized, orange-red fireball whistled through the air, heading straight for the bully's face. Although extremely unstable, it was quite potent. Ah! The older student yelped in terror and scrambled backward to dodge. The fireball grazed the corner of his robes and smashed into the stone wall behind him. Poof! It burst open, leaving a scorched mark, with sparks flying everywhere. The followers were also stunned into silence. Miles himself was frozen. He looked at his wand. He looked at the scorch mark on the wall. Then he looked at the opponent's shaken face. He had done it. You dare. The older student snapped back to reality. Furious and humiliated, he drew his wand. But a certain bravery had been unleashed within Miles. He gripped his wand tightly and did not back down. What is going on here? A cold voice echoed from the end of the corridor. Everyone stiffened instantly. Severus Snape. The bat-like figure emerged from the shadows. His gaze first fell upon the scorch mark on the wall. And he smelled the lingering smoke in the air. The older Slytherin student immediately put away his wand and spoke first. Professor. He attacked me with a fire-making spell. Snape's black eyes turned to Miles. Mr. Miles. Miles's face was pale. The hand holding the wand was trembling. They started it. What I see. Snape interrupted him, his voice low, yet carrying absolute pressure. You are the one holding the wand. And you used a dangerous spell that is outside the scope of first-year curriculum. And posed a threat to a fellow student. Faced with the situation before him, Miles couldn't argue. Moreover, he understood Professor Snape's nature. Explanations were useless now. Detention, Mr. Miles. Starting tonight, for 1 week. Furthermore, 20 points from Slytherin. For your recklessness and idiocy. Miles lowered his head even further. Bedroom. Nighttime. Miles had just finished scrubbing a cauldron covered in stubborn potion stains. He returned silently from the staff area. Miles finally couldn't help but whisper, his voice thick with tears. I'm sorry, Jakes. I failed your teaching. I couldn't hurt that guy when it mattered. I still haven't become strong. Jakes didn't stop what he was doing. He didn't even look at him. No. You haven't failed anyone else, you've failed yourself. You have tried hard, but you haven't tried hard enough to succeed. Now that you've been punished by Professor Snape, those people will only become more arrogant next time. Miles was in danger. Miles was startled. I will practice the Incendio spell diligently. Next time, I will teach them a proper lesson. Jakes nodded toward Miles. Exactly, that is what you truly need. Do you want to help me? Miles paused. Do what? After a moment, Jakes looked serious. Change Slytherin. This place is filled with internal strife, survival of the fittest, and pointless glorification of bloodline. True power can transform chaos into order. Miles was half understanding, half confused. But he immediately agreed. I will diligently carry out your plan. A few days later. Slytherin common room. Draco Malfoy seemed to have recovered some of his spirit. He was sitting in the best spot by the fireplace, boasting about something to a few first years. Jakes walked straight over. And stood in front of him. The common room instantly fell silent. All eyes focused on the spot. A flicker of nervousness crossed Malfoy's face as he looked up. But he forced himself to remain calm. Jakes. What do you want? Jakes's voice was not loud, but it carried throughout the common room. You seem to have a notion before. About who the leader is. I am giving you a chance to challenge me right now. Use whatever method you are best at. Spells, potions, or even your father's name. He glanced around. His eyes swept over the face of every Slytherin student. Win against me. You will remain the Malfoy heir who can command the wind and rain. Lose. Then recognize your place, shut your mouth, and behave yourself. At least be obedient when you are in front of me. A naked challenge to authority. Malfoy suddenly stood up. His eyes were filled with the wrath of humiliation. But there was more, a fear of Jakes's power. Are you worthy? What? Are you scared? Why wouldn't I dare? Draco Malfoy gripped his wand, but his hand trembled slightly. The eyes that usually agreed with him. were now mostly observing, perhaps even holding, a hint of expectation. But the failure in the trophy room instantly deflated his courage. I won't agree. I know exactly what your goal is. I certainly won't let you succeed. His goal. It must be to make him lose face again. A mudblood trying to stand at the peak of the bloodline hierarchy. Dream on. However, Jakes didn't look at him again. Malfoy chickened out. He concedes. From today onward, at least the first years, steer clear when you see me. Furthermore, meaningless bullying is forbidden within Slytherin. There were no cheers. No explicit support. In the silence, many were simply watching the show. They thought this was merely Jakes settling a grudge with Draco Malfoy. A mudblood establishing a new order. The very idea sounded ridiculous. However, Jakes was deadly serious. He was now truly the undisputed leader among the Slytherin first years. Regarding a certain mudblood asserting dominance. After some pure-blood wizards snitched, head of House Snape learned the full story. And so, the potions classroom. A marvelous night of detention. The air was thick with the smell of cauldrons and mixed herbs. Miles scrubbed hard, stealing a glance at Jax beside him. The other boy was cleaning methodically, his movements precise and efficient. Miles finally couldn't hold back, his voice echoing in the empty classroom. Jax, I'm sorry I couldn't help you. It's fine. I expected something like this. Take the consequences, and then move forward. Just then, the classroom door slid open silently. Severus Snape's black robes barely brushed the floor. His dark gaze swept over them and the stack of partially cleaned cauldrons nearby. His lips were downturned, showing his displeasure. It seems, our two distinguished gentlemen are not using this precious time for deep self-reflection. But are rather, exchanging pleasantries. Jax stopped what he was doing, turned around, and faced him directly. Professor Snape. We are completing the punishment you assigned. Snape slowly approached, his voice dropping lower, laced with menace. Completing the punishment. I thought the purpose of detention was for certain individuals to learn to follow the rules. Not to reinforce their arrogant delusions. Jax's eyes met Snape's harsh glare. Jax did not back down. Instead, he asked an unexpected question. Professor. What does Slytherin House's admiration for ambition truly mean? I would like to know, in your opinion, is it the satisfaction derived from bullying, or should one pursue power, knowledge, or even change? Snape's expression remained unchanged. However, the tension in his brow betrayed his surprise. Immediately, a deeper scrutiny fixed upon Jax. Ambition. That is not something a first-year student should be pontificating about. Follow the rules and mind your own business, Mr. Jax. He did not answer directly. He left behind a vague warning. He turned again and disappeared into the shadows outside the door. Miles didn't dare breathe. Only when Snape's footsteps faded into the distance did he finally relax. Jax thought to himself. What kind of rubbish answer was that? The days of detention were monotonous. Jax did not waste this time. While scrubbing cauldrons, his mind never stopped working. He constantly reviewed the spells he had learned. The details of every hand movement. The subtle feeling of every magical flow was repeatedly rehearsed in his mind. Spellcasting ability. Improved. Current template. 41.2% integrated. The template integration level had increased. Although extremely slowly. This improvement was closely related to his recent magical practice. Subtly, it fostered a greater synergy between the template and himself. Practicing magic diligently increases the integration level. Jax silently confirmed this pattern. He continued the boring task at hand. Yet his thoughts were immersed in the world of magic. The afternoon following the end of his detention. Jax received a note. The parchment carried the faint scent of lemon sherbet. Mr. Jax, if you are free, please come to my office during afternoon tea time for a chat. The password for today is on the back. Albus Dumbledore. Cockroach cluster. Jax spoke the 3 words. The massive stone gargoyle sprang aside. The spiral staircase extended. He arrived at the marvelous headmaster's office. Inside the room, various silver instruments whirred softly, and the portraits of previous headmasters pretended to snooze. Dumbledore sat behind his desk, his blue eyes behind his half-moon spectacles radiating warmth. He gestured toward the chair in front of the desk. Then he pointed to the table, where a bowl of cockroach clusters sat. Ah, Mr. Jax, please sit down. Would you care for one? They taste quite good. No, thank you, Headmaster. Jax sat down calmly. Very well. Dumbledore took one himself and popped it into his mouth. His expression showed pure delight. I asked you to come mainly because I wanted to understand the situation. Regarding your scholarship eligibility, and the recent little commotions. I note that you participated in a duel shortly after the term began, and you have just finished serving detention. Jax admitted frankly. Yes, Headmaster. The duel was permitted by Professor McGonagall. The detention was because I disagreed that blood status affects a wizard's ability. Dumbledore nodded. I must confirm whether these activities will affect your academic performance and your eligibility for the scholarship. After all, the prerequisite for this funding is excellent academic performance. Jax lifted his gaze, meeting the headmaster's eyes without flinching. Professor Dumbledore, I assure you that neither the duel nor the detention will affect my grades. In fact, I believe these activities allow me to gain a deeper understanding of the magical world. Furthermore, any one of my professors can attest to my level of study. You are welcome to ask Professor Flitwick, Professor Sprout, and Professor McGonagall. Of course, Professor Snape might use somewhat biased words to describe me. Dumbledore listened quietly, his fingers tapping lightly on the desk. Oh, I have no doubt about that. Several professors have indeed reported to me that you have shown extraordinary comprehension and execution in class. Quite so. Even Professor Snape subtly mentioned your keen sensitivity to potions' ingredients. In that case, I am relieved. Dumbledore's smile grew warmer. So the scholarship is fine? Jax asked tentatively. He had already enrolled. If there were any issues, he would have to find another solution. However, Dumbledore nodded, dispelling his doubts. Rest assured, there will be no problems whatsoever. Thank you, Headmaster. The next second, Dumbledore's gaze deepened. Remember this, Mr. Jax. The greater the ability, the greater the number of choices. And how we make those choices often defines who we ultimately become. I understand. The conversation ended. Jax left the headmaster's office. He knew. This meeting wasn't just about the scholarship. It was a close-up observation, by the headmaster. But fortunately, Dumbledore hadn't said much. As for whether he saw through anything, Jax smiled. As long as he didn't think Jax would become someone like Voldemort, that was enough. Hogwarts Library. Tall bookshelves lined the walls. Jax moved through the aisles between the shelves. The books were all titles like Powerful Potions, Magical Drafts and Potions. His goal was clear. Advanced Potion Making. It's not here either. How can this be? He muttered to himself, frowning slightly. The books in this section only contained recipes for basic potions. What he needed were truly practical and relatively safe formulas. But he couldn't find them at all. What are you looking for? A familiar voice sounded beside him. The tone was filled with a hint of curiosity. Hermione Granger was standing there, clutching a thick book. Some information about potions. Jax answered vaguely. Hermione glanced at the section of shelves he had just been browsing. She then noticed something keenly. Something for boosting magical power. Most of the truly practical formulas are either lost or recorded in the restricted section. She pointed toward the back of the library. The area cordoned off by chains. The restricted section. An area completely forbidden to students. Unless they had a professor's permission. I see. Jax wasn't surprised. I was just hoping to find some peripheral clues. Like certain special herbs that have a gentle stimulating effect on magical power. Hermione grew interested. That's actually a good approach. For example, moonstone powder is said to stabilize magical power. But brewing potions requires ingredients, a cauldron, and a proper location. It's very complicated. One has to try, doesn't one? Jax's tone was calm. Hermione looked at him. She seemed to be searching for something on his face. You are really different. Other first years are still struggling with how to make a feather float. Thank you for the compliment. Jax ended the brief conversation. He turned and walked toward another section of the library. That area housed texts related to herbology. Hermione watched his retreating back. She pursed her lips and left, clutching her large book. Clearly, although Jax had been sorted into Slytherin, he was far more indescribable than she had imagined. A few days later. The herbology greenhouse. Professor Sprout was repotting a mandrake seedling that appeared to be dozing off. She was wearing thick dragon hide gloves. And so. Jax found her. Professor Sprout. Mr. Jax. Is there something you need? Professor Sprout looked up, a kindly smile on her face. She had a very good impression of Jax. Jax got straight to the point. Professor, I would like to request permission to help you tend the greenhouse outside of class time. Such as weeding, watering, and processing some basic ingredients. Professor Sprout was slightly surprised. Why? That requires a lot of time. I need some herbs. Jax admitted frankly, for private research, but I don't have purchasing channels or galleons. So I was hoping to exchange labor for them. This was the only legal way he could think of to acquire magical plants. Professor Sprout looked at his serious gaze. Private research. Can you tell me the general direction? Some plants are very dangerous, my dear. Jax chose a relatively safe explanation. It's an exploration into the guidance and nourishment of magical power. Limited only to common ingredients. Professor Sprout considered for a moment. She seemed to find the topic quite interesting. All right. I could certainly use a helper. You can come over for an hour every day after classes. Thank you, Professor. From that day on, Jax began his work in the greenhouse. Whether he was squeezing pus from bubotuber boils or processing Mimbulus mimbletonia, he could keenly perceive the changes in the plants. Until a week later, when he successfully calmed a restless fanged geranium root. Detected host's talent for understanding and utilizing magical plants. Herbology talent unlocked. Potions level. SSS. Another SSS. It lit up on the system interface. Jax looked at the familiar 3 letters. His heart remained undisturbed, he even felt like smiling slightly. I'm used to it. He continued his work. After some time had passed. Professor Sprout also fulfilled her promise. He now had a stable source of herbs. Coupled with the SSS level herbology talent providing a profound understanding of the plants. Jax began his potion-making attempts. Using fragmented recipes found in the library, along with his own understanding of herbal properties. He secretly used a small cauldron in his dormitory, carefully mixing the drafts. Silverweed, Dittany stalks, the essence of a calming flower stamen. However, during the brewing process, his first attempt still resulted in failure. But the SSS level talent granted him immediate insight. He immediately adjusted the proportions, changed the preparation methods, and optimized the heating sequence. Finally, after the second attempt at brewing, the swirling purple liquid in the cauldron gradually settled, transforming into a deep, starlight blue. Success. Jax looked at the small vial of blue potion. A potion to boost magical power. It actually worked. I have to try it quickly. A light flashed in Jax's eyes. He tilted his head back and drank it. He immediately felt his magical core grow by 0.01%. There was no helping it. The SSS level magical power made this slight increase seem minuscule. Even his template integration increased by 0.01%. This path is viable. Now the future is just a matter of slow accumulation. Subsequently, he utilized his free time even more to work in the greenhouse, collecting more ingredients, and brewing magic potions. However, Slytherin House was, after all, a small community. Rumors spread too quickly. And eventually, it attracted the attention of a certain person. The dormitory door opened. Severus Snape stood there. His judgmental gaze locked onto Jax and the potions. His voice was icy, carrying undisguised anger. It appears. Our star student has been using his talent in a more interesting direction. He strode in and snatched all the potions off the desk. Illicitly brewing potions that are undeclared and of unknown effect. This is a severe violation of school rules. Mr. Jax, you have successfully attracted my special attention. Effective immediately. You are forbidden from engaging in any further potion brewing activities. Otherwise, he paused. The threat was palpable. You will face the consequences. Having said that, he gave a cold snort and turned to leave. Jax stood rooted to the spot, looking at the empty desk. There was no expression on his face. Only a hint of a smile deep within his eyes. Inside the potions office, Severus Snape stood before his workbench. His face was pale, Several vials of potion confiscated from Jax were laid out before him. And, his own failed attempts at replication, none of which reached 100% purity. Under the dim light, he observed them closely. Within the deep blue liquid, starlight seemed to flow slowly. The consistency was incredibly pure. But his own failed product. What is missing? Moonstone powder base. Calming draft extract. No. There's something else. He muttered softly. Sparks occasionally flew from the tip of his wand. Trying to analyze the ingredients. The ratio. That doesn't seem right either. He tried over a dozen combinations. Even employing some advanced potion analysis techniques. But the effects were never as stable as the original. Was this the level of an ordinary first year potions genius? HMPH. Snape squeezed the words out from between his teeth, carrying a feeling of intense disgust. But then he disparaged him. A pity. He's a mudblood. In his view, this background predetermined Jax's accomplishments. He wasn't worth being truly valued. Illicitly brewing unknown potions. Disregarding school rules. Mr. Jax clearly requires a more profound lesson. He strode toward the door, deciding to immediately add at least a month of detention. Facing a month of detention. Jax's reaction showed no protest, no dissatisfaction. There wasn't even any noticeable emotional fluctuation on his face. Very well. Professor Snape, I will complete my detention on time. This nearly submissive attitude. Snape merely gave a slight sneer, not giving it much thought. However, Jax thought to himself. Detention. Perfect. He could use this time to carefully consider and change his strategy. His gaze was now fixed on the inside of Slytherin House. Those pure-blood families had deep foundations, they were not easily shaken. What if the first target was still Draco Malfoy? Or Pansy Parkinson and the others surrounding him? What could Snape possibly say then? At worst, he would make all the pure-blood wizards sink to the same level as the mudbloods. Everyone would get detention. I heard. For certain simple spells, like Reparo. If the magical output is stabilized by 5%, the success rate can be greatly improved. I recently discovered a potion that does this, I might consider developing it. Jax spoke carelessly. He had intended the words for Miles. But Draco, who was nearby, looked over. Lately, he had been frustrated by his repeated failures with that particular spell. Moreover, Pansy keenly picked up on something. She tugged on Draco's sleeve. You have a solution. His voice was strained. Only then did Jax look up at him. What? Are you interested? Of course. There's always a way, it just depends on whether the price is worth it. Draco sneered slightly. Price? Are you underestimating the Malfoy family? You can tell me what it is. A clandestine transaction was reached within Slytherin House. Jax began selling these bottled potions. He even offered customized potion services. Tailoring the service to each person's specific magical bottleneck. Providing highly suitable potions for assistance. The effects were remarkable. Draco, Pansy, and a few others in their inner circle almost immediately became the first batch of clients. As for the price, galleons were the most obvious part. The hidden price was human desire. Jax watched the galleons flow into his money pouch like running water. At least for the next semester, he wouldn't need to apply for financial aid. Draco Malfoy stood in the corner of the charms classroom, frowning deeply at a cracked ink bottle. Then he waved his wand. Reparo. Previously, he failed this spell 8 out of 10 times. Either nothing happened, or the crack simply grew larger. But after taking one dose of the potion provided by Jax today, the magic within him seemed to have become obedient. After reciting the incantation, the crack in the ink bottle mended at a visible speed. Completely restored. It worked. Draco was incredulous. Pansy murmured in awe. Merlin, he actually did it. Draco had never imagined that a pure-blood of his standing would need external assistance to stabilize his magic. Worse, the potion came from a mudblood. Thinking of the mudblood he despised, complex emotions arose within him. Perhaps it was jealousy. More than that, it was a realization hanging around him. What are you saying? I'm saying, they need to stick close to him. It seems, they can genuinely gain tangible benefits. Regarding Draco's reaction, Pansy momentarily thought he had gone mad. That night, He wrote a letter to his father, Lucius Malfoy. Dear Father, my life at Hogwarts is quite pleasant. Recently, I have made some noble pure-blood friends, as well as some special friends. From this friend, I have acquired a treasure, allow me to explain. In the letter, he did not mention the previous conflict or humiliation, nor the identity of the mudblood. Instead, he focused on describing the auxiliary abilities provided by the miraculous potion. Furthermore, this mudblood friend could be brought over. This type of potion is a treasure that can rapidly accumulate influence. Father, if his abilities could be used by the Malfoy family, you should consider it. Draco Malfoy. An owl carried this meaningful letter, flying towards Malfoy Manor. Late that night, Lucius Malfoy received the letter. He read the parchment, noting his son's tone of high praise. His neatly trimmed eyebrows rose slightly. His pale, slender fingers tapped lightly on his serpent head cane. Jax. Jax. The fellow from Flourish and Blots. His legendary wooden wand, potions that boost magical power. Consider bringing him over. He murmured the name softly. A look of deep consideration flashed in his eyes. A mudblood whose value Draco would acknowledge. This was becoming interesting. Malfoy Manor. Lucius Malfoy was holding the potion bottle. The young Malfoy had specially sent a bottle back. His eyes were filled with scrutiny and astonishment. He did not take it immediately. Instead, he first swept several detection spells over it to confirm it was non-toxic. Only then did he carefully drip out a single drop. Immediately afterward, his spirits lifted. Even the old injuries accumulated over years of studying dark arts were slightly alleviated. The increase in magical power was visibly negligible, but it was enough to prove its value. Unbelievable. A first-year student could actually produce something like this. No wonder Draco was so concerned, he's finally starting to use his brain. Narcissa Malfoy sat gracefully across from him. She keenly noticed the change in her husband's tone. Draco mentioned in his letter that he was sorted into Slytherin. Yes, Lucius affirmed, a mudblood who managed to get into Slytherin. To possess this kind of talent as well, that explains a lot of things. He absolutely cannot be a true Muggle born. He must have some hidden, worthwhile wizarding blood flowing through his veins, just waiting to be unearthed. Perhaps he is the descendant of a fallen pure-blood or half-blood family. Half-blood. The word was uttered as a matter of course. Narcissa nodded slightly. If that is the case, then his value is even greater. A child who is without backing, yet possesses such potential. If we can bind him to the Malfoy family, his talent in potions will be of great benefit to Draco and to the future of our family. Cooperation. Lucius quietly repeated the word. A sharp glint flashed in his eyes. Yes, cooperation. We can consider offering him protection and resources in the name of the Malfoy family, in exchange for his loyal service. The couple exchanged a look, reaching a consensus. A secret plan began to brew in their minds. Hogwarts headmaster's office. The atmosphere was somewhat delicate. Dumbledore sat behind his desk. His gaze was calm. Professor McGonagall's expression was serious, her back straight. Snape stood in the corner, his face even gloomier than usual. Even Professor Sprout, who rarely participated in such matters, was unusually present. Regarding Mr. Jax's recent activities, Dumbledore began slowly, his voice gentle. I would like to hear your opinions. Opinions. Snape made no attempt to hide his anger. He openly violates school rules by privately brewing and selling potions of unknown effect. He is misleading students and disrupting house order. I believe he must be severely punished. Extended detention, massive deduction of house points, and perhaps even considering stricter disciplinary action. Professor McGonagall frowned. Severus, I understand your anger. But it cannot be denied that Mr. Jax possesses extraordinary magical talent. Madame Pomfrey and Professor Sprout privately tested this potion, its properties are stable and harmless. Shouldn't we consider multiple factors instead of outright rejection? Minerva is right. Dumbledore nodded. Mr. Jax has a unique background. His methods for seeking power and certain sources of income might be somewhat aggressive, but they have caused no actual harm. On the contrary, he seems to have, to some extent, stabilized the internal environment among the younger years of Slytherin. He looked at Snape. The latter merely scoffed, neither confirming nor denying. Just then, Professor Sprout spoke up. I highly approve of his actions. Simply because he helps tend to the greenhouse plants without asking for much in return. He even manages to utilize the plants' properties effectively. The other three professors fell silent for a moment. Professor McGonagall was visibly happier. Only Snape curled his lip in a sneer. It was almost undisguised. Based on the number of opinions, we can tacitly approve Mr. Jax's actions. My suggestion is primarily observation, with moderate restraint. Unless he does something that genuinely harms the school or his fellow students. Do you agree? I agree, Albus. Agreed. Professor McGonagall and Professor Sprout replied. Snape's tone was icy. I reserve my judgment. But I hope you won't regret today's leniency. He turned and strode out of the office. A few days later. One evening, Jax was returning to the dungeons after finishing his work in the greenhouses. He was stopped by two people in a secluded corridor. It was the Weasley twins, Fred and George. Identical mischievous grins were plastered across their faces. Hey, Jax. One of them, probably Fred, greeted him enthusiastically. The legendary little prince of potions. The other, George, followed up with a wink. We heard you have some special little gadgets that are highly effective. Fred leaned closer and lowered his voice. We have a brilliant idea. How about we cooperate? We handle the creativity and the sales channels. You know, we're regulars at Zonko's joke shop. Could you create a potion that turns hair rainbow colored? Or one that makes people burp golden bubbles? Fred guarantees you'll make a fortune. George added. We'll split the profits 70/30ths. You get 7, we get 3. Fair enough. Their eyes gleamed, as if they could already see galleons beckoning to them. Jax's face was expressionless. He waited until they finished speaking before calmly opening his mouth. No cooperation. The twins' smiles instantly froze. Why? This would absolutely be a sensation across the whole school. I'm not interested. Jax's tone was indifferent. My time and energy are precious. The twins exchanged a look, feeling somewhat dejected. But Jax's next words stunned them. However, I am very interested in something else you possess. What? George asked subconsciously. The Marauder's Map. Jax clearly enunciated the name. The twins' expressions changed instantly. How do you know about? Fred lowered his voice and glanced around. That is not important. Jax interrupted him. Trade it for the Marauder's Map. I can offer you a one-time custom potion service. The effect will be far more practical than any joke product you could imagine. He stated his condition, then said nothing further. He walked past the stunned twins and left immediately. Fred and George stood rooted to the spot, silent for a long moment. The Marauder's Map, how could he? A custom potion, that sounds incredible. What should we do, George? We need to think this through, Fred. Hearing their hesitation, Jax thought to himself, it's settled. Thanks for watching.